Okay, hello everybody. I'll leave my face here for a second while I say welcome. I'm happy to see so many here. I imagine that living in Danbury, if you're nature lovers, you've probably been to the Chippewa Dam in Southbury. I do volunteer there. It's unfortunately we had to close this year because of the Omicron. So last year we didn't operate, and we started this year, but then we had to close. So if you have not been there, it's a great place. It's to see bald eagles. We have some of our resident eagles there. Plus we also have migrating eagles from the north. We've seen as many as 28 eagles in one day there. So it's a great place. And also during the hours, we generally have a live birds of prey show. So it's totally free. You just have to sign up online. So that's a really good resource for all of you to see bald eagles. So anyway, we're going to get started. And again, like I said, if you think of a question during the talk, please put it in chat and we will go over it at the end. But also, I would love to hear you at the end ask questions. So I'm going to get rid of my face and you can see the beautiful eagles. So I got to move the strip of people there. Okay, so the bald eagles, I call them the comeback raptors, and you'll see soon why that's so. This is a golden eagle, and I want to give you a little history of the species of eagles in history. There's probably no other bird in history of mankind that's inspired gods and man than the eagle. The Bible, philosophers, Shakespeare, Aristotle, Pliny, great military leaders like Alexander the Great, Julius Caesar revere this majestic bird of prey and praise its independence and singularity. Whenever you see in ancient Greece and Rome, Aquila, which means eagle in Latin, was the king of the birds. It could ascend above the storm and become the messenger of gods. Whenever you see a statue of Zeus or a picture, most likely there's going to be a golden eagle nearby. That was his animal. And Odin also, the head of the Norse gods, the eagle was his special as well. Many religions, including Christianity, reference the power of eagles. This is probably one of the most famous quotes. There you can see it is a mighty majestic, that would have been referring to golden eagles, but this is the bald eagle. The bald eagle's only in North America. When Rome's legions, they were never without their Aquila. You can see the standard, the golden standard in the top right. The eagle has spears and arrows in its talons, and it signified ferocity, strength, and power of the eagle. When Caesar, before he would go into battle, his legions would come before him, and he would sanctify the golden eagle. I guess he thought he was godlike too. And if somebody fell and the standard fell, another soldier would have to take it up. There's many civilizations. This is Babylonia that revered the eagle. A quote that I really think really exhibits how powerful of a symbol the eagle is by the ancient philosopher Pliny. And he said of the eagle that she beats her young ones while in an unfledged state, meaning they're in the nest, with her wings and forces them from time to time to look steadily upon the rays of the sun. And if she sees either of them wink or even their eyes water, she throws it headlong out of the nest as being spurious and degenerate, while on the other hand, she rears the one whose gaze remains fixed and steady. Kind of brutal, but the upper left is an image of an eagle. Native Americans revered the eagle. It was said to represent the sun for most Native Americans. In areas where there are totem poles, which not all Native Americans had totem poles. Mostly it's a Pacific Northwest and Alaska phenomenon, but you will generally see a bird atop the totem pole, and that is a combination of an eagle and the thunderbird and the phoenix, and it's called the thunderbird. So very powerful. These are some of the countries that have the golden eagles as their symbol. You can see we've got in the Renaissance, Germany, Poland, France, and of course, the American eagle. Our neighbor to the south, Mexico, has its emblem, a golden eagle eating a snake. It's a pretty popular image down there. It wasn't officially established as their symbol until 1821. And it does depict a story of Mexican culture from the ancient Aztecs. In 1325, long before most of North America was discovered, the Aztecs populated this area known as Mexico. They, according to legend, the wandering Aztecs wanted to know where to build their new city when they saw an eagle perched on a cactus. The image didn't appear to them, but in an unlikely place on a tiny island in the middle of Lake Texcoco, and now that's Mexico City. But to be able to build their city in the middle of that lake, they had to form a number of small garden islands with causeways. And later on, the snake was added to the symbol and the olive branches to denote peace. So I found that one of the most interesting of all the symbols aside from ours. Again, other countries, a lot of them have the double golden eagle. South Sudan adapted the fish eagle, which is very similar to our bald eagle. Other countries, more recently, Kazakhstan, Albania has it. There are more than 60 species of eagles in the world. They're large birds of prey, and they're members of the family Accipitridae. I took 5 years of Latin, but with my Texas accent, I did grow up in Texas, although I've been here my whole adult life. I had trouble pronouncing it. Most of these 60 species occur in Eurasia and Africa. The Steller's eagle, which I'll talk about in a minute, because a lot of you may have seen that we do have a Steller's eagle now up in Maine. It is not the one that escaped coincidentally from the Pennsylvania Zoo, which I think has been recaptured. But coincidentally, that happened during this whole movement of the Steller's eagle up to Maine. It's the heaviest. It can weigh up to 20 pounds. It is generally in Eastern Russia, parts of South Korea and Japan. It developed during the Ice Age, so it's a very, very old eagle. The largest eagle in the Americas is that interesting looking harpy eagle on the right. It's the most powerful raptor in the Americas. Bigger than the bald or golden eagles. The name of it refers to mythology, the harpies, which were monsters in the form of a bird with a human face. It inhabits the rainforests of Central and South America and is the national bird of Panama. It is an endangered species, largely because of the depletion of the rainforest. They average about 3.5 feet in length when they're sitting, and they weigh just under 20 pounds. Their lifespan can be up to 30 years, but now with the shrinking of the rainforest, they are, again, endangered. The smallest eagle is on the bottom left. It's the Great Nicobar serpent eagle. It is only 1 pound and 16 inches in length, so very small. Obviously, it's not the size that makes an eagle an eagle. And now we'll speak of the Steller's eagle. A friend of mine who lives in Maine but grew up in South Windsor, Connecticut. He's a professional photographer, and he very excitedly was able to get photos of the Steller's eagle. But the most magnificent shot, I thought, was the bald eagle flying over the Steller's eagle. And you see the bald eagle tending to be pretty aloof, doesn't even look down, but the Steller's eagle is looking up at the bald eagle as it flies overhead. This bird, the Steller's eagle, is called a vagrant. I'll explain what that is later. It started more than a year ago in its flight from wherever it first came from. And it went through Alaska. They say it was in Texas. There is one picture, one person saw it on a ranch with it sitting on top of a stick on the ground. A lot of Audubon people are a little skeptical that it was really there, but somebody found the actual stick it was sitting on. But anyway, then it went on up to New Brunswick, Nova Scotia. And then this December, even David Sibley, the famous bird guide person and artist, he raced over to Taunton River in Massachusetts, where they were stunned to see the Steller's eagle on December 20th, 2021. Very exciting for birders to get this bird on their list. Pun intended, folks flocked there to see this astounding bird. And it is about 1 foot longer than an adult bald eagle and 5 pounds heavier. So, and it has that kind of a bill that I think is kind of looks more fitting on a bird in a Disney movie. Vagrancy is the tendency for birds to show up far outside their normal range. And it is one of the most exciting aspects of birding. It's not like an incidental that sometimes gets blown here. Although when this one showed up in Texas, there had been a big northern storm. So there's really no way to know, because the only way we can identify where it is when people see it. But this one is the epitome of a vagrant bird, and it has been tracked across North America since it was first spotted in Alaska. There is a YouTube video. I encourage you just to Google it, and they show a map of the bird's progress. It's pretty interesting. So that was very exciting for people. Carl also got this photo. You can see how really large the bird is. That's his website. He is a professional photographer, and he does let me use photos quite often, and I'm very grateful for that. This photo is now being used in an Audubon article about the Steller's eagles flights. Eagles of the world, here they are. This is not in size, you know, when they put them in the guide, they're not to scale, but it does show you the difference in look in all the eagles. So this is interesting. I always like this. If you're, you know, the library folks, people like the library. The harpy eagle and the mythical phoenix inspired the design of Fawkes the Phoenix in the Harry Potter series. Dumbledore's pet phoenix that periodically would burst into flames shares his name with the most infamous traitor in English history, Guy Fawkes. It's a joke on the author's part, apparently. She's British. Guy Fawkes Day, or Bonfire Night, is a huge celebration in England held on November 5th, and it celebrates this fiend's thwarted attempt to blow up Parliament. As you know, a phoenix is a long-lived bird associated with the sun and obtains new life by arising from the ashes of its predecessor. So I always thought that was kind of interesting. The golden eagle. In the United States, we have the golden eagle and the bald eagle. Here in Connecticut, we just mostly have the golden eagle in the winter when it migrates from northern climates. A lot of times in northwestern Connecticut, although there have been a few seen down near the shoreline last year and this year. So it's a great thing to see them. I'm going to show you how they can be mistaken for an immature bald eagle as well. Again, the bald eagle is only found in North America. Its greatest concentrations are in Alaska, where they have around 30,000, and also in Minnesota and the contiguous United States and Florida. The golden eagle, though, is worldwide. It can be found also in Europe, North Africa, and Asia. It's about 3 feet tall in height, and it can weigh up to 14 pounds, which is usually the maximum weight of a female bald eagle. In the eagle world, sorry guys, the females are larger, and it can have a wingspan up to 7 feet. The largest female bald eagle could have a wingspan up to 8 feet, so she could be a little bit bigger. So I don't forget to tell you this, northern bald eagles are larger than southern bald eagles, and that's true as well of black bears and some other animals. As predators, the golden eagle is a carnivore and the more ferocious of the two great birds. It does prey on small mammals. It could take your little poodle out of the yard, but it wouldn't likely be near your yard. It has been known to attack livestock and domestic animals such as dogs and cats. It's very solitary and prefers high mountainous areas. Their territory and range can cover up to 165 miles. They're the fastest eagle in the world when they dive. They can dive up to 200 miles per hour when beating down on prey. There's only one other bird, and I'm sure you could guess it, that is faster, and that's the smaller, much smaller peregrine falcon, which can dive at speeds of up to 245 miles per hour. The bald eagle has a bigger head. If you look on the right, this is what we call an immature bald eagle. A lot of people mistake these for golden eagles because right now you'll see the immature eagle still has a dark beak. The bald eagle doesn't get its white head and tail until it's almost 5 years old. And in between it'll have different colorations. Some will be more dark on the bottom, some will have a lot of white, but their beaks don't generally start turning yellow till their 4th year. Their first years, they're called, after they fledge out of the nest, they're called juveniles. And then the second, third, and fourth years, the second and third years, they're called immature bald eagles. The fourth year, they're called subadults. So why all these names? Not sure. I think immature could just work. On the left, you see a young golden eagle, and they tend to have a lot of white patches under their wings, two distinct ones. That will lessen as they get older. But if you look at the bald eagle on the right, and this is a way you can tell when a bird's really high up and you say, oh my goodness, that's an eagle. The eagle's head and tail are pretty equidistant from their body and their wings. Whereas you see the golden eagle has kind of a short head. If you see a vulture, generally speaking, the turkey vultures have a little V shape when they're flying and they rock a lot. The black vultures, which we also have a little, they soar a little bit more, but their heads will be closer to their body. So this is just a way to tell birds when you see them flying. Here's some more views so you can see this. Again, juvenile bald eagles, as you see on the right, are a mixture of brown and white. And then their beaks start out dark and their eyes are dark, and then they'll turn into yellow. Here's the flight above, and you can see the progressions of the immature from the juvenile all the way up to the adult. And also on the bottom is how the golden eagles see those white part on their wings almost totally disappears when it's adult. They do call it a golden eagle because of the brown highlights on the back of the head and neck. And when the sun hits it, it is very gold. I can say I saw this when I was hiking twice in Scotland at sunset. Golden eagles came flying over, and it really did. The back of their neck really did look golden. It was quite spectacular. It was almost like, hey, did somebody open the door so I could see these eagles at sunset? Anyway, here's the golden eagle's ranges. You can see that it pretty much hangs around year round out in the west, and that it's breeding pretty much up in Alaska and way north into British Columbia. It does migrate here, as you can see. Just furthest it might migrate would be New Jersey. We're very lucky that we do have it sometimes here. And here's the bald eagles range. You can see they're pretty much overspread in the US now. They breed mostly, though, still northerly breeding. This map is a little old because they do breed here in Connecticut and all of New England now. It's been a great success story, and I'll tell you about that as we go along. So here's the bald eagle's Latin name. I won't even attempt to pronounce it because it's too long, but at least you get to see what it is. Obviously the Luco in there means white. To me, it's a singularly beautiful and magnificent bird. I've seen hundreds of them probably now in my lifetime, and it's a member of the sea and fish eagle group. This is a photo of one I took. I don't have like a $10,000 lens, so I use my little telephoto on the Wild and Scenic West branch of the Farmington River in Barkhamsted, and there's quite a few eagles I see there. Again, throughout the centuries, eagles have been a very powerful symbol. Here are some of my favorite eagle quotes. You can Google anything. So Carl Sandburg said, there's an eagle in me that wants to soar, and there's a hippopotamus in me that wants to wallow in the mud. And isn't that true of most of us? You know, we always kind of procrastinate. Crazy Horse, again, this emphasizes how important the eagle was to the Native Americans. A great vision is needed, and the man who has it must follow it as the eagle seeks the deep blue of the sky. Bald eagles can fly as high as 10,000 feet. I've never seen one out of plane window, but I'm sure somebody has. So one of the more famous eagle quotes, Houston, Tranquility Base here, the eagle has landed on the moon. I can guarantee you, having been in journalism and public relations for my whole career, Neil Armstrong didn't write that. There were probably a whole table of suits and ties, no offense guys, sitting around the table, probably some women too, that threw out all these quotes, you know, and finally they ended up with this. Now Neil Armstrong may have said part of it, that I think we should have an eagle, and the eagle was the name of the vehicle that landed on the moon. So it's sort of hard to soar with the eagles when you're surrounded by turkeys. If you don't know Longfellow Deeds, he wrote the worst and longest paragraph ever, even longer than William Faulkner's first paragraph in The Bear. He's a favorite author of mine, not Longfellow Deeds. But again, you can Google any picture, and I'm going to tell you quickly the story about Ben Franklin and the wild turkey. As most of you know, Franklin was an erudite, sophisticated diplomat. He was a genius, an inventor, a writer, author, but when it came down to it, he was very practical. After the Continental Congress adopted the Declaration of Independence on July 4th, 1776, it next decided it needed a symbol of the country. So it asked Franklin, John Adams, and Thomas Jefferson to try to design a seal. Each man submitted a proposal, but their designs were awful, blandly allegorical and pedantic. After they completed their work, we have the description of each man's. There you see John Adams, and he wrote to his wife Abigail and said this is what he was proposing. He suggested an illustration depicting the choice of Hercules. This Greek allegory has Hercules, you can see him there, deciding which path to walk in life by deliberating with the female personifications of pleasure and virtue. Imagine that on a coin. And then to the left there, Jefferson went to the Bible, and he wanted an illustration of the Israelites' exodus out of slavery and bondage from Egypt. No, that didn't fly. And then Franklin first proposed similar idea to Jefferson's. He wanted to illustrate a scene from the exodus of the Israelites. He would show Moses parting the Red Sea with the Pharaoh and his chariots being overwhelmed by the waters. And his motto would be, rebellion to tyrants is obedience to God. Well, needless to say, the Continental Congress decided we can't put these things on a seal. So after a few years, they went to this guy. And if you know history very well, Charles Thompson was the only secretary of the Continental Congress. He was very highly regarded. His name was the only name alongside John Hancock. And whenever a paper came out, he would have been responsible for it. And people would say, here comes the truth. So the Continental Congress went to Thompson, who also was a doodler. And I hope he wasn't doodling, when the Declaration came out, but who knows, maybe that's how they knew he was a drawer. But they asked him if he could come up with a symbol. So he came up with this on the left. And then it evolved into what we now have as our seal. It was adopted in 1787. I'm sorry, it was approved by Congress in 1782 and really introduced to the American public in 1787 in the Columbia magazine. So here's what we kind of have now. We see it on coins and other things representing the United States. And here's what all these things mean. This is called the obverse. So this is the eagle. If you'll see the stripes, the olive branches, the arrows, the stars, every one of those are 13, and they represent the original 13 colonies. In one hand, where the eagle's facing, we have the olive branch, which means we preferred peace. In the right, though, we're prepared to defend our liberty. So quite interesting how they put these things together. But again, next time you take out your wallet, blast Hotel California by the Eagles or catch up on NFL football, just think about how far that symbolism of the eagle has traveled into our lifetimes. So here's the story. If any of you are teachers, you tell everybody that Ben Franklin wanted the turkey originally. Well, that wasn't true. A few years after the Revolution, there was an order of the Cincinnatus, which was basically a veterans group for Revolutionary War soldiers. And they wanted to come up with a symbol. So they had gone to Franklin and was asking him. So he wrote a letter to his daughter, Sarah, in 1784, part of which you see in front of you, and said he wished that they hadn't asked the eagle. And one other part of the quote that I really liked was that he felt that the eagle was arrogant, that it did steal food, which it does, that he can be very lousy, which is true. The turkey's a much more respectable bird and an original Native America, although guess what? So was the bald eagle, so were mountain lions, so were wolves. But he felt that, the turkey would even chase British soldiers away. So that was in a letter to his daughter. So the way the historians think that we got the idea that Ben Franklin wanted the turkey as our symbol The New Yorker, which has been a magazine, don't ask me why, I've subscribed to since I was in junior high in Texas. This artist depicted what he thought a turkey might look like as our official symbol in November. Obviously, it was tied with Thanksgiving too, and New Yorker has very funny, sometimes subtle humor, although this wasn't so subtle. And the U.S. Diplomacy Center feels that this cover helped popularize Franklin's preference for the turkey. So there is a long way to tell you how that happened, but I'm always interested in history and any species. When the colonists came to America, we were over 95% forested in Connecticut and most of New England. And of course, they had to cut trees down to build their houses. They also would send wood overseas to make masts for ships and furniture. And pretty soon, unlike the Native Americans who only took what resources they needed as they needed them, they had felled most of our trees for farms, where we ended up, pretty barren of trees into the early to mid 1800s until farming moved out west. And then a lot of the farmers had to work in industry and stuff. But we also, the colonists shot most of our wild animals that they felt might prey upon them or prey upon their livestock. So many of our animals, including the turkey, the black bear, were extirpated, and the numbers dwindled to very low, and the mountain lion and the native wolf were totally eradicated. So we weren't the best when we came here. So there's no single cause for the decline in the bald eagle population in the U.S. Of course, the Europeans wiped out many of them when they came here. The natural habitat of them had been cut down. Bald eagle populations declined in the early 20th century because of loss of habitat. People just shot them. They weren't protected. They were trapped. And then in the late 40s, we got DDT. I remember seeing fields crop dusted all the time with DDT. It was put there to kill insects. Imagine it did some damage to us and our lungs as well. The use of these pesticides during the 50s and 60s, especially DDT, accumulated in fish, other animals. And when animals would eat another animal that was poisoned, what happened eventually with our birds of prey is it made their shells very thin, so they couldn't sit on the shells without them cracking. So that greatly affected population. You can see here, not to scale, because obviously peregrine falcon eggs are not bigger than a bald eagle's eggs, which are about the size of goose eggs. But you can see how it made those eggs totally unviable. If they weren't crushed during incubation, they oftentimes would just not hatch. So this really affected our populations. Before DDT was banned in 1972, there were 1,350,000,000 pounds of DDT had been produced and sprayed in North America. Kind of unbelievable. It does cause reproductive disorders and nervous system disorders in animals. Well, then this woman came along. Again, the New Yorker first published her book, part of it, Silent Spring. It was an allegorical novel led to the banning of DDT, and it was actually a springboard for the environmental movement. It was first published in the New Yorker in 1962. I noticed some of you look like you're in my age range, so I had to read this in junior high, and it's well worth a read again. Her writings, The Sea Around Us, The Edge of the Sea, if you're into the environment, are very important books. Because of this book, she's credited as the founder of the American environmental movement. She raised awareness, and this helped bring pesticide use to the public, and it led to the banning and supported the creation of many environmental organizations. She did get a lot of death threats because of this, but eventually it did lead to many things, including the Environmental Defense Fund was formed in 1967 in reaction to the DDT problem. So very important book. The bald eagle's recovery is, as I said, one of the best known examples of how our environmental laws work to restore not just a resource, but our very national symbol. This is a photo I took from my kayak in a very rocky lake up in New Hampshire. And if you're privileged to go out on little boats, sometimes you can get some pretty good pictures, even if you don't have good cameras. This shows you nesting pairs is how we pretty much gauge populations. And that's not just true with birds, but also black bears. We have collared sows, and we follow how many cubs they have every year. Again, the largest population is in Alaska. There's more than 30,000 birds. If any of you have ever been to Sitka, Alaska, the bald eagles are sitting in trees kind of like pigeons. You know, there's a lot of them there. And even though you might see their feathers strewn on the ground, it's illegal for anybody to possess an eagle feather except for a Native American. And it's also illegal for us to possess any bird feathers, but you know, I'd be hard pressed not to give my great nephew a blue jay feather if I found it. Anyway, it's truly a comeback raptor. Many animals never come off the endangered species list, and they usually end up just being extirpated. But aside from the bald eagle, two other pretty large animals that did come off that list were the American alligator and the California gray whale. Today, it's estimated there are at least 316,000 bald eagles in the lower 48 when there are only just 417 nesting pairs in the early 60s. Pretty incredible. There in 2019, the latest numbers we have, there were more than 71,400 breeding pairs in the lower United States. Now people think, well, gee, that doesn't seem like much of a growth, but in animal wildlife, when their eaglets only survive 50% their first year, it really is a remarkable comeback. I'll tell you a little bit about what we just had, midwinter eagle survey results, and I'm very much for a citizen scientist. That means we like you if you see black bears or you see fisher, not fisher cats, people. I'll talk about fishers if Catherine wants me back, but they are weasels, nothing to do with cats. So don't say fisher cat, and they don't scream either. They barely growl. So anyway, this is one thing you can get involved with. This happens in Connecticut every second Saturday of January. And I'm going to give you Brian Hess's email. And if you remember, around the end of November, you can email him if you want to participate. And basically, you go out, he'll assign you a certain area to watch and see if you see any eagles. And it's pretty fascinating. Because of COVID, we only have 2020. We just now did 2021. So anyway, so in 2020, we had 230 volunteers. It was quite mild then, so the numbers probably weren't as high as normal when it's cold. There's 588 miles of shoreline that was covered. That includes lakes and rivers, 150 observation sites, and 181 bald eagles seen. It's hard to differentiate which are our residents, because we do have resident population now, and which are migrants. Eagles only migrate as far as they have to go to find open water. So consequently, you know, we have open water in Connecticut, even severe winters. So a lot of times our eagles never go anywhere. Quickly, I'll show you. This is all you have to do. You fill out this form. You say what area you're covering, the counties, the starting point, the end point. You have to say the date, what time you start, if the bird is roosting or just flying around, or what the temperature was there wind, things like that. So it's not that hard. You just fill out this little form. It's really kind of fun. It was pretty cold this Saturday that we did it. But,
okay.
Can you hear me still? Okay. So that's the form. And Brian's name, I thought I had it here. Yeah, right there. So at the top, you can see. So state email addresses are usually the person's first name with a period, then his last name at ct.gov, unless it's judicial, which I worked for, and they have their own JOD ct.gov. So Brian Hess would be who you contact. And again, I encourage you. It's kind of fun to do that. And so here's breeding season results from 2020. I'll explain it. So we see how many territories there are, how many become active, and that means that's a nest. Bald eagles go back to their same nest every year and add to it, and that's how the nests get bigger and bigger. If the nest fails, maybe the cover over them, or, you know, in March, we tend to get snowstorms with pouring rain afterwards and wind. So oftentimes some of these nests, particularly newer nests, will fall down. They do mate for life unless one of them dies or if they're not productive. So in 2020, we had 72 active territories, which mean we had nests and 2 eagles trying to establish territories. 47 of those were successful, which means they laid eggs. And out of those, there were 88 chicks produced. So this is pretty incredible when you consider in 1992 in my town of Barkhamsted, which is 65% reservoir or state forest, is where we had and noted our first nesting pair of bald eagles. So look at how far we've come from 1 nesting pair to 72 active territories. So that is really a great story. Unfortunately, in Danbury, you have no active nests that we're aware of. Sometimes there are nests on private property and people don't tell, you know, that they have a nest, which in the long run is probably good for the eagles. But if you tell the state, they don't tell anybody. Eagles used to be pretty timid about putting their nest up near people, but we found that our eagles also, like a lot of our animals, tend to tolerate a certain amount of urbanization and suburbanization. Down in New Haven County, we have an eagle's nest in a cemetery. I said it's kind of quiet there, but then they also have an eagle's nest in Manchester and Hamden, right near like shopping centers. So we do have eagles now, but we still try to protect certain areas where we know there are nests, and try, like Chippewa, you're allowed in there to watch the eagles when you sign in, but that whole area there is closed during the winter, even the hiking trails across the river to protect the nesting eagles. So I'm sorry, this is the more current one, and they didn't give a very good image. Some of these PowerPoints, we're given these PowerPoints, and I usually change mine and add a lot of photos that I've taken or other people. But again, Danbury, no, you do have them around, but not right there. So this is the history of eagles. I will tell you this later, but because I'm getting older, as I see something, I try to say something. So you can see on the left, even though there's a bow in that branch, the eagle that's larger is the female. The female is about 1/3 larger than the male. And really, there's only 2 ways you can tell it. You can tell it if they're next to each other, and you can also tell it by their primary feathers. I'll show you later the males, and that smudge you see on the one on the left, that's just a weird coloration of this female bald eagle. Usually that would be all white, but their primary feathers, when they're folded back on a male, will hang over part of the white, but we don't get the chance to see that often. So here's their history in Connecticut. There were no nesting eagles up until 1992, which we knew of. And in 2010, they were downgraded to threatened in Connecticut, and now they are common. Here's historically how they've been. In 1940, Congress enacted the Bald Eagle Protection Act. In 1962, they added an amendment that added the golden eagle. So there were protections over these animals. They couldn't be shot or captured or trapped or anything. Then many of them were listed, as I said, under the Migratory Bird Treaty Act, which was enacted and protects any migratory birds. And it's very important, these acts. You'll see here some more. The Lacey Act was enacted in 1900. If you remember, in the Victorian age, women wore a lot of feathers on their hats, and they got this by shooting all kinds of birds, from flamingos to birds of prey and everything. And so the country finally put a stop to that, and that did. So these 3 acts are mostly the acts that are really protecting our birds of prey and other birds. So what are threatening eagles now? Wind turbines are one of the biggest culprits, aside from man, meaning directly from man. Millions of bats are killed every year by wind turbines, as are hundreds and hundreds of thousands of birds of prey. And I know if you've driven by these, you think, well, they really turn very slowly, but they're turning a little faster than they look, and apparently they have been very fatal to many birds. Green energy is commendable. Most of us support it, but they're trying to make certain modifications in these turbines where they're placed to try to counteract the slaughter of many of these birds. Most of the recreational hunters are law-abiding and safety conscious, but there are eagles killed by gunshot wounds. Also electrocution. A lot of power companies now are putting these triangles up onto these poles, because if a bird puts 1 foot on a live wire and 1 on a ground wire, it can electrocute them. That's how we lose a lot of the really young eagles. Lead poisoning, of course. Connecticut has banned lead lures, which I'm grateful for. They have not yet banned lead shot, but there are alternatives for lead shot. What happens if a excuse me, if a deer shot and the hunter dresses and takes whatever part of the deer they want, there's always bullets left in the deer, and even an infinitesimal amount of lead can poison a bald eagle or even larger animals. Another culprit is rodenticide, rat poison. Please use snap traps. I say it's circle of life. I have a 1760 house with a dirt cellar, so I have plenty of mice running around, but I trap them, even though I don't like to. Take them outside, and within an hour something has eaten them. So I call it circle of life. At least, you know, a lot of eagles, because the first way they feed themselves is through dead stuff. So occasionally they'll be on a road and get hit by cars. If food's scarce, they will starve. And like I said, half of the young ones do, because they haven't really sharpened their hunting skills. A lot of times an eagle, even though they can swim, they might end up in the water because they misjudge the altitude, or if they snag a fish or a duck that's too heavy, there's a danger they could die from exposure. So it's pretty tough out there for these animals. So again, how long can they live? For a large bird with no natural predators, their death rate is high, because if you factor in that only 50% of it survive their first year. But if they do survive that first year, they stand a much better chance of living a full lifespan, which could be up to 30 years. Most on average make it to 15 to 20 years. So pretty remarkable. I'm going to tell you the story. The oldest wild banded bald eagle on record in the United States was an alumnus of a conservation program that brought eagles back from near extinction in New York State. At just a few weeks old, they sent this eagle, 03142, from Minnesota, from a nest, and took it to New York's Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge, which is a pretty cool place, with some eaglets from other states. They had only one nesting pair then, and they were hoping that these eaglets would stick around when they fledged, and they did. A few years later, one of the male of their original nest died, and they're pretty certain 03142 took his place. He was brought there in 1977, and over the next few decades, he fathered many young eaglets, but then he met his fate. He was hit by a car on a road, because at that time, he was 38 years old. So they think that he was eating dead stuff on the side of the road, because he had probably become unable to fish and feed himself in any other way. Here's his, you can see how big the talons and the feet are. That's the federal band. We'll talk about banding later. And this is how they knew that this is that eagle. And he lived to be 38 years old. It's the longest lived of any eagle on record. So pretty remarkable for that. I always said if I was a deer of some wildlife, I'd hang out at a golf course or a wildlife refuge, but I guess they don't know that. So anyway, so the bald eagle, I've told you a little bit about how big it is. It is a big bird. The female sitting in a tree can be up to 37 inches high, well over a yard. The wingspan can be up to 8 feet, and it can weigh up to 14 pounds. Males are smaller. Sorry, guys. Usually on average, our males are around 8 to 10 pounds with maybe a 6-foot wingspan. So again, when they're side by side, it's pretty easy to tell them apart. And here you can see on the left, that's the female, on the right, the male. Here again, even though this is far away with my poor zoom camera, I cropped it a little and you can see the female on the left. Her head is always much larger than the males. There again, now there's the primary feathers I told you about. So this is a male. You can see how they overhang the white tail. On the female, that wouldn't happen. So that helps you identify this is one of our eagles on our west branch of the Farmington River. Pretty cool thing, a bald eagle has 7,200 feathers. It's kind of like when they give you that jar of pennies and you have to guess how many there are. I never know how they count all these feathers, but anyway, they're hollow and they make up about 7 to 10% of the bird's weight, but 30% of those feathers are on its head. Imagine that. The bones are hollow and they take up only 5 to 6% of their body compared to ours, which take up 20%. If you're into anatomy, here's the different sorts of feathers they have. The primaries are those little wing-like things on the end. They provide the thrust. So you'll see an eagle, they don't flap a lot. They'll take a couple of flaps and that gets them going pretty far. They do catch those thermals as you see them going up and up and up. That's catching a hot air thermal. And if you see a bunch of birds, eagles or vultures going up in that way, that's called a kettle. The group is called a kettle. Their secondaries, which you see there, provide lift, and their retroces, which I'm not sure if I pronounced that right, they provide their braking and steering. You can see this photo I took of this bald eagle. You can see it turning, and it will use its tail to navigate itself. Again, there's another wing shot of the primaries. My friend Cheryl Anderson has got one of those big lenses and also a very good eye, and she goes out very early in the morning and she's able to get these photos. So the light's not always the best, but the one thing about eagles, and you'll see another picture that really depicts this, their wings are so large, so depending on what tree they're perching in, they might have to do like a free fall to be able to get those wings outspread. As you can see in this photo I took, this bird was up in a real thicket of limbs, and in order to get those wings outspread, it had to just do like this free fall until it's kind of free of the branches. So that's pretty cool to watch. Here's their typical flight pattern. This is called planking. And if you think about it, it's kind of like a 2x4, straight out pretty much. It's a very typical way of seeing a bald eagle up above. Again, I always like to include history. Most of you probably know John James Audubon, famous ornithologist and painter. He had heard that there was like an unidentified species of eagle on the Mississippi River. So he hired a guide, and a lot of the ornithologists of the time were around as well. And he saw it and he called it the mightiest of the feathered tribe. He was so excited that he discovered a new bird of prey. He named it the Washington sea eagle. But when he got home, got out of the boat and over to the local tavern or whatever, the other ornithologists were there and he was bragging about it. And then about 10 of them said, "You idiot, that's an immature bald eagle." So he did anyway paint it, but it wasn't a new species. So here's how bald eagles, as they grow, change their coloration. On the left would be a first-year bald eagle. You can see the dark eyes and the dark beak. The one on the right would be 3 to 4 years. The one on the bottom right is as it's in its 4th year going towards adult. Here's an image that didn't come out very well, but this gives you a little more progression from a half-a-year-old to a full adult plumage. So in their heads, most particularly, they change more than their bodies, because you'll see variations in the immature bald eagles as we go along. Some can be really white underneath, some more dark. On the right, there's an immature bald eagle. See, it still has a dark beak. But a lot of people might look at this and have no idea that it's an eagle. Oh, I saw a golden eagle, but no, you just saw a golden eagle. It's much darker except for those patches on the wing. So here's a first-year plumage. This is my photo, but most of these are by Paul Fusco, who's our DEP photographer. He gets to go out with a biologist and just sit around and take photos, which is a pretty cool job, and he's very good at it. He's also an artist. So first year plumage, you see the beak is dark, the eyes are dark. This one's fairly dark underneath. Here's two by a friend of mine flying over Bantam Lake, Leo. Here's one I took. So you see this one has a lot of white right down the middle. So they can vary a lot. So here's our second year plumage. You see this one has a lot of white underneath, which is probably more typical, but there are some that stay brown underneath. Here's another one. This one's very white. You like think, oh my gosh, is that a giant red-tailed hawk or something? But no, because we know the red-tailed hawk has that dark band across its white chest. A good way to notice it. Plus, it's a lot smaller. But we're really bad at gauging size. All of us, you know, you see a yellow lab running across the road at dusk, and you come in and tell, honey, I saw a mountain lion, you know, or whatever. You know, it takes a lot of practice to observe animals and figure out exactly, you know, what they are. So here's another immature. You see quite white. Here, the one on the left, that's its fourth year. It's heading towards adulthood. This is what we call a subadult. See, the head is really changing. The tail's starting to change, and the body is getting darker. There's another one. It didn't come out very well. A friend of mine, Tom Hester. I have to get the original photo from him. Again, here's the size comparison. Obviously, a female on the right. And then here we are, a magnificently beautiful. Look at those feathers. The bald eagle adult. And as you can see, I taught you those primary feathers lapping over the tail. This is a male right here. So quickly, I want to tell you the difference between the osprey and the bald eagle. This photo doesn't make the osprey look that much smaller, but it really is. It's hard to do side-by-side comparisons, but they are sometimes confused for one another because they have similar habitats and compete over food. The osprey we call the St. Patrick's Day bird because that's when it comes back to Connecticut, generally around that time, and starts building its nests on, a lot of times on human-made platforms, but sometimes up on big power transformers in different places. But this is what you'll quite often see once they start getting established. You'll see the bald eagle chasing the osprey because the osprey is smaller and a much better fisher. The osprey generally is successful 8 out of 10 times when it goes for fish. The bald eagle is under 50%. Largely because they do have good eyesight, but when they stretch out those big legs to go and snatch whatever they've just seen in the water, the bald eagle can no longer see the prey down below. So that becomes catch as catch can. In flight, ospreys do have similarities to juvenile bald eagles, although they're much smaller. They have brownish fur with white mottling. They have a dark colored bill, but they always have that mask. Look at that mask on their face. So that's a key difference to tell. When an osprey goes to catch a fish, they actually do go underwater, or they can. The bald eagle does not, even though, as I said, it does swim. Ospreys have a laundry list of adaptations that are absent in hawks that feed on terrestrial prey. They are plunge divers, as you can see here. They'll tuck their wings backwards and dive in feet first. Usually they go under the water briefly. The soles of their feet are really cool. They have these tiny sharp tubercles that create a non-slip surface for gripping fish. So they're able to grab those fish and hold them. The bald eagle doesn't really have that. Their outermost toes can swing back into with their rear toe, which is called a hallux. And that helps make the foot position easy to handle wriggling fish. So they're very well suited for fishing. Kleptoparasitism is when one thing steals from another. And the eagle, as Franklin said, was really good at sharping because the eagle will dog these osprey and steal fish from them quite often. This is a photo I got of a bald eagle on a road, like a little road in Simsbury, Connecticut, I saw these big birds on the ground. I'm like, oh my gosh. And the red-tailed hawk on the left had a squirrel in its beak, and the bald eagle wanted it. So it chased it. Guess what? The squirrel fell and ran off. So then these two, the bald eagle goes up and starts chasing the red-tailed hawk and hectoring it, even though the prey was gone. So anyway, again, the body size of a bald eagle can be from 8 to 14 pounds, and the osprey only 2 to 4.5 pounds. So quite a difference in size. In fact, if you look at this red tail and the bald eagle, that's about close to the size comparison in the two of them. So again, you have the bald eagle chasing the osprey, trying to get that little fish, and it's and here's an osprey leaving a limb. It's very good at fishing, as I said. And here it is. My friend Cheryl took this photo on the Farmington River of the osprey has just gone under the water and come back up. There it is, like getting out. And there it is with its fish. That's a trout of some kind, I think brown probably. I'm not really a fishing person, but it's eating away at it. Proportionately, an osprey for its size can carry heavier prey than the bald eagle. The bald eagle really can only carry around 4 pounds, although there have been some chronicled incidences of it not carrying sheep, but maybe a duck. But generally speaking, if it captures a duck, it'll swim to shore and then start dismembering it. This is my one shot with a fish. I was in a kayak, and it's pretty hard. I had a photographer in the front with a $10,000 lens, and I wanted the photo. So I said, you better just hold on, because I'm going to use my sorry little camera and try to get a picture. So anyway, here's an eagle I took on the Farmington, giving me the evil eye. And speaking of eyes, that is one of the things they're most noted for. They hunt by sight. They're renowned for their excellent eyesight, thus eagle eye. Eagles, like all birds, have color vision. Their eye is roughly the size of a grown man's, even though their weight is at 1/20th of a human being. The sharpness is at least 4 times that of a person with perfect vision. They can identify a rabbit moving almost a mile away, and if they are flying at about 1,000 feet over open country, they could spot prey in an area of almost 3 square miles from a fixed position. Pretty amazing. I say, Superman, move over. They do hunt by eyesight, but their eyes are stationary, so they have to move their heads to see objects. Their vision is 3D, which is the same as binocular vision. And that means that both eyes focus on an object at the same time. This is very important for a fast hunter gauging distance to a potential meal. Eagles, like beavers, bobcats, some other birds of prey, have what's called a nictitating membrane, and that's an opaque covering that goes over their eyes that helps keep debris out of their eyes. If you're again into anatomy, here are some of the names of things, and there's that nictitating membrane is inside there. So feet or talons are the business end of eagles. They have 4 toes. The rear toe is called the hallux, H-A-L-L-U-X. It's like our big toe. Their talons are made out of keratin, like our fingernails, and they can grow up to 2 inches long. They have a mechanism in their talons that lock the talons while they're sitting on a branch so they don't flip around like in cartoons. And they just have to kind of bend their leg and it unlocks those talons. So what the eagles need to survive, obviously, like most species, including humans, we don't need nests, I guess, but I guess our home is a nest. They need food, they need nests, roosts, privacy, and a healthy environment. 90% of their diet is fish, even though the first way they get food is dead stuff or carrion. The second, they steal it from other birds, usually the osprey. Up there on the left, he's stealing it from an immature during the winter. And the third is they hunt or fish usually. During the harsh weather, they perch like 90% of the time. So in the winter, they're only flying around about 10% of the time to get food. If they feed one day, they can skip a day if they have to. They have to eat up to 1.5 pounds of food per day, with a minimum of 0.5 pound. They do have a crop, so they can keep some food in there if it's severely cold out. Again, they can fly up to 10,000 feet. They only fly about 30 to 35 miles per hour, but I'll tell you, once they jump off of a branch, they get going fast pretty quick, and you got to be pretty quick with your camera. I never hunted, but I was really an eagle-eye trap shooter, and I could hit 2 of those skeets when they crossed each other. And I learned that learning to follow a skeet, a clay pigeon, taught me how to follow a bird in flight and get some pretty good pictures. And you learn how to lead it a little bit, and that was very helpful. Again, eagles are strong swimmers, but in the winter they could get hypothermia. Their hunting area can vary up to 10,000 acres. And their home areas are generally smaller where food is abundant, so they don't have any reason to go around. Their territories when they're nesting are about 2 miles. So it's no secret the survival and recovery of bald eagle was and is dependent on clean water and the availability of healthy fish. We have had a lot of eagles coming in with lead poisoning and rodenticide to our rescue people, one of which is Christine Critters, not far from you in Westland. She's a remarkable young woman who has done great things for our birds of prey. So there again, you can see this eagle looking down, like probably sees a fish there. Whitewater River is not the easiest for them to fish in, but there generally are fish there. So here you see him eating carrion. I grew up in Texas and was just in Texas and Oklahoma visiting family. All of a sudden I'm driving. My brother has a stupid, muscle car, but he lets me use it. I don't have to rent a car, and it's red. And I saw a bald eagle feeding on a deer carcass, but it was a fresh deer carcass. And I'm like, oh. So I went around and tried to turn around and come back because I wanted my own photo of an eagle on a carcass, and it went up on the pole, and I got a great photo of it on a pole, but I didn't get it with a deer carcass. So, you always got to have your camera. You got to always be ready. So they are scavengers. My friend Cheryl took this photo near my house of a crow eating a possum. And we do like possums, they eat 4,000 ticks every month. So you want to try to keep those little critters. They're not going to harm you. So anyway, this eagle comes flying in and trying to scare the crow away, and it actually did, and got to eat the rest of the possum. But you see, it's in the middle of the road. Oh, sorry, not a good place. So here it is, hectoring a red-tailed hawk, and finally got that prey. So they really do go after other foods, so they don't have to expend a lot of energy, and they're bullies. So they are pretty gregarious at certain times when it doesn't involve food. They'll fly up to 12 miles from their feeding area to find a roosting area. Generally, a roosting area will be less wind, pretty thick, trees, and they will pick it for protection from, again, the wind and vegetation and a favorable environment. Alaska, they hang out together all the time. Again, they're not very aggressive towards each other unless it's over food or during nesting season. So the life cycle of eagles, here you see there's a female on the right, a male on the left, even though he's kind of hunkered down. So the nest, we're in the nest building part of our time with our eagles right now, and it's pretty cool to see. This eagle right now is carrying small nesting material, which will be made into a nest cup by the female. Both of them bring materials to the nest, but sorry again, guys, the female is the one who arranges everything once they get the sticks there. I saw an eagle bouncing up and down on a dead tree limb, which was as long as a leg and about as big as around as an arm, and it actually carried that whole piece to the nest. Their nests are called Aeries, A-E-R-I-E-S. Here's an eagle I took on Bantam Lake, the frozen lake. It's leaving the tree and going after some nesting materials. Here's one carrying one single stick. So sometimes they'll just bring a single stick. Again, there's some softer nesting material. So this is our typical nesting season, although with climate warming up, it's changed a little. We're seeing some of the pairs getting together in late December. Generally, it wouldn't be till January. Even somebody told me late November. So anyway, they'll build their nests up until around March. So mid-February to mid-March, they'll lay their eggs, they'll incubate them, and they'll fledge the young. And by August, the young are staying around, but probably not being fed by the parents, although they try to be fed by the parents as long as they can. So the nest can be very big. On average, they're about 6 feet across, and they get deeper and deeper every single year. The largest bald eagle nest is pictured here. It was in St. Petersburg, Florida. It has since fallen down. It was almost 12 feet wide and 20 feet deep, and it weighed an estimated 4,409 pounds. And I'm thinking, how the heck do they weigh that? But I guess maybe they got all the sticks together at the bottom and weighed it. I'm not sure, but here's a nest at a center in the Midwest where they have some eagles, the Decorah eagles on camera. And this was just built by people just to show you how big and how it sits inside. A few pictures of the eagles. They don't have their eggs yet. So sometimes they'll both sit in the nest and they'll just hang out after they've done their building for the day. Once the eaglets have grown to full size and flesh, within a month or so, the pair will go on their own ways, and do their own thing until time to come back together. So here they are in the nest together. This is kind of a small nest that's being built every year, but you can see they really lace in those that wood a lot to make it very firm, because those eaglets, and generally they'll end up with about 2 eaglets out of 3 eggs maybe, and they become full size by 9 weeks. So that's quite a bit of weight in those nests. Here's one in March. She was sitting on her eggs and she totally got snowed on. So she has to keep those nests, even a few seconds off the egg can make them where they don't hatch. So one of the interesting things about eagles is when they mate, they lock their talons, and that's not how they mate. It's just, their dance. It's called the cartwheel or death spiral. Sometimes their talons get locked and they fall to the ground, and they do die. Recently, 2 did fall to the ground and didn't die, and biologists had to come out and unhook their talons. So, but they'll go up to high altitudes, lock talons, and tumble towards the earth. The juveniles will do this. The siblings, just kind of as a matter of practice. And anyway, right now we're in mating season. You can see here again, those 2 birds I showed you. Sorry about that. That's mating. That's how they do it. It's like, here's the reproduction cycle. They lay eggs 5 to 10 days after they mate. And one at a time usually. Sometimes one might be laid a whole day before the others, because the eagles like to have survival of the fittest. Generally speaking, the older eaglet will get more food, and then the younger ones just get whatever's left. So once the eggs are there, incubation can be up to 36 days. Both the male and female do sit on the eggs, although the female a little more because she's bigger and can cover up things better in bad weather. They do get this thing called the brood patch, which is very interesting. The males and females can both get them, although it's generally more in the females. It's an area on the parent's chest that doesn't have feathers. It touches the eggs while the parent is incubating them, and that allows for a more efficient transfer of heat to the eggs. Animals have very interesting adaptive characteristics, and this is one to me that's really incredible. And it does keep them. So when we see the female or male in the nest and they're wiggling as they settle upon the eggs, they most likely are spreading that bare patch over the eggs to keep them warm. Pretty interesting. So here's a couple of eagle's eggs. You see it's in a little nest cup. And here they are. So they're pretty big. The eaglets are born and they're blind and they can't raise their head for 2 days. They have this little thing called the egg tooth. If you look on that little eaglet, you'll see a little white on its beak that'll eventually turn to black. But in that egg beneath it, you'll see that little white egg tooth, and that little eaglet's trying to get out of that egg. So pretty interesting. Here's their growth rate. They're 3 to 4 ounces when they're born. Again, can't lift their head. They're usually pretty gray. They grow about 1 pound a week. By the 3rd week, they're nearly a foot tall. 4 to 5 weeks, they'll start standing and moving around the nest. They're nearly full grown at 6 weeks. Generally by 9, they're full grown. At 8 weeks, they'll start standing at the edge of the nest, flapping their wings, getting used to what it feels like. And again, by 9 weeks, they'll be full grown and pretty much as big as they're going to be, but they will develop a little more muscle and weight in their wings once they start flying. So they'll fledge at about 10 to 12 weeks. Pretty fascinating to watch if you have access to a nest. Here they are when they're young. Here's the male fishing. Once the eaglets are born, the male tends to do more of the fishing because it's smaller and a little better at fishing, but he will have to relieve the female sometimes so she can go out and spread her wings and kind of get a little movement in herself, maybe dry off. But generally speaking, she'll sit on the nest more than the male. A friend of mine out west is a fantastic National Geographic photographer, and he let me use this. You can see those little fuzzy gray heads there, and she's coming in, or he's coming in with some food. Here they are. You can see the adult's eyes. Paul from DP took this. Very fascinating. Here's one. They will tear apart whatever the meat is and give little pieces to the eaglets. At 8 weeks, though, the appetites of the eaglets are at their greatest. So the parents almost have to hunt continuously to feed them. Plus, they have to feed themselves. And that's when the eaglets start stretching their wings in response to gusts of wind and change in weather. Then they start at about 9 weeks to 10 weeks branching. Sorry about that. So you can see the eaglet there now is almost full size. So they'll leave the nest, but not very far. They'll go out on a branch near the nest and just kind of sit there and hang out, trying to see what it feels like. There you see a young one below the mother or the father, I think. And they'll do that for a while. And then this one is fledged. This one went from the nest you just saw over to another branch, and it got pretty nervous. There's one just sitting in the nest. Here's one just spreading its wings. So you can see the difference in coloration. See how dark this one is. And its sibling had a lot of white underneath. Here they are together, just hanging out. And there they are, first flight. I think I see a little terror in those eyes, but there they go. And then they go over on the adult's favorite perching tree. And the one that spread its wings was pretty brave and went back to the nest, but this other one lingered a while. It was kind of afraid. So here they are practicing the talon lock. So then after they're about 9 weeks old, our biologists, and they didn't really go out much in COVID, they will go to as many nests as they can get to, and they will climb up there and they will get the eaglets and put them in a net and lower them down to other biologists beneath the tree. And everybody says to me, well, how come the adults don't attack that biologist? I said, well, the adults are usually in the next tree over making all kinds of their little chirrups, and they think that's a pretty big bird, so they don't want to take it on. So generally, the biologist gets them down, and then they process them. They generally only will put bands on newborns, the eaglets, and that's how we determine age on eagles. But unfortunately, unless somebody has really great binoculars or camera, which a lot of photographers do, we won't know where certain eagles are, until they have died. But this is a way, that's how we found out that 38-year-old one died. So they measure them, they weigh them, they put the bands. Connecticut's band is black with white letters. The federal band is steel. And you really can't read those letters from far away, but you can see this in Massachusetts. You can read those bands. This particular bird was on Bantam Lake nesting, and it originated at Quabbin Reservoir in Massachusetts. Here's the Connecticut band, very visible if you have good lenses. You can see how big those feet are and those talons. So why band eagles? Because it gives us information on how successful our birds are and where they disperse to. And it's really the only way to age a bird once it's reached adulthood. So if you see an eagle nester nesting, again, Brian Hess would be the guy you'd contact. They just like to know that. People don't like to report things like bears because they think they're going to get in trouble, but generally speaking, it's just a way that we can help kind of tell, oh, there's a bear K6, it's over in Danbury and it should be in Simsbury, you know, so that just helps us see how the animals are dispersing. My friend Cheryl got a picture of this one, nowhere near water, although that doesn't mean much because we know there's water all over Connecticut. This was in Granby, and she actually was able to hone in and get that band, and she sent it off to the national banding area. And this is what she got. She got a little certificate for seeing that eagle who was first banded in Michigan in 2017. So that's pretty interesting. These are colors of local birds. Again, the federal government silver, we're black with white, Massachusetts is gold with white, New York's blue, New Jersey green. So I'll end up with this interesting story about these three eagles. They're out in the upper Mississippi River Refuge, and you can watch a game cam with them. It started out with Star and Valor 1, who was just Valor before Valor 2 showed up, because when Star was sitting on her nest, Valor 1 decided to leave and he wasn't feeding her or anything. And then Valor 2 came in and started helping her and raised those eggs. And then Valor 1 came back. And so now they're all together. And this is called polyandry, where a female mates with more than one male and both males help care for the nest. So quite interesting. And they're apparently still together last I heard. How can you observe eagles? Well, in Connecticut, if you go near waterways, and you guys are near Candlewood and Warramug, and a lot of those big lakes have eagles flying around, and winter's a really good time to see them. Just get yourself a sandwich, get in a car and go sit by by a body of water. Usually a lot of birding sites on Facebook, you can see people said, oh, I saw a bald eagle over at Candlewood at Reservoir Road or whatever. So and then again, I encourage you when Chippewa opens again to go there. It's usually mid-December till the first couple of weeks in March, but COVID has shut us down again right now. Also, you can see birds of prey from a phenomenon called mobbing. Have you ever seen like a little sparrows or little birds chasing a crow, or crows making a lot of noise around a big tree, which means there's probably an owl or a bird of prey in there? Well, this crow is chasing this bald eagle all around. And what they do is that smaller birds do this to point out that there's a predator in the area, but they also do it because they can. A bird of prey can't turn around in midair. They can only go down and beat upon stuff. So this crow knows this, and it can keep flying over and just bugging the heck out of this eagle. So pretty interesting thing. But when you hear a big ruckus, the crows, when there's a bird of prey around, goes like balk, balk, balk. It's like a different call, and then you know there might be. So here's one of those little juveniles saying, feed me. I just thought it was cool to see that tongue in that. So anyway, thanks to my friends, Paul, Cheryl, and Leo, and all my other friends that let me use photos, and long may they soar. And